Hi there, it's Nicole here for Lawn Fawn with a Some Bunny Easter themed card to share with you today. This features the new Some Bunny stamps and dies, as well as the new stitched garden border, which is perfect for creating your own little garden. And I'll even use some of the previously released simple grassy hillsides to create that little grassy border back behind the new stitched garden border. I'm going to start with a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock and that stitched garden border die. I'm going to position that there, try to center it as best I can, use a little low-tack tape to hold it in place and run that through my die cutting machine. Then once I have this, I am going to die cut the grass border using a simple grassy hillsides die from what I have left over. So let's go ahead and color in the garden with Gathered Twigs and Ground Espresso Distress inks. I'm going to blend these in. Because I'm using Bristol Smooth cardstock, the distress inks are going to blend beautifully. However, I don't want to get my fingers in them. The ink does take a little bit to dry and you can leave finger marks, so I always like to use a scrap piece of paper to hold that down while I'm inking it. I started with Gathered Twigs and felt like I needed a little bit more darker edges, so just along the top where all of the stitching and die cutting is, I will add some Ground Espresso ink. And then blend back with the Gathered Twigs to get that nice seamless blend. Spritz the whole thing with water from a distress sprayer. I think it helps with making it look a little bit more like a garden. Blot that dry with a paper towel. Clean up my work surface with a little additional water and my paper towel before moving on and coloring in the next border. And I'm going to use that scrap piece of paper I just used to line up that grassy hillsides because I want it just to be sticking up just above the stitched garden border. And I love that the dies work together so beautifully. That's going to look fantastic together. And I will ink this up with Lucky Clover Distress Oxide ink. I just happen to have this ink out. You could use the regular Lucky Clover ink if you wanted to as well. I am not going to be distressing this border at all, and because only the blades of grass are really going to be sticking up above the stitched garden border, I'm only going to ink that edge. I just want it to all be nice and green. So there are my two borders. I'm going to take another piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock, and on this one I'm going to ink it up with Salty Ocean Distress ink. Kind of going dark to light, so it's darker next to the landscape and a little lighter at the top. Once I have this inked up the way I want it to look, and I don't have to ink the whole thing. In fact, I'm going to be trimming this down to shorten up my scene a little bit. I just need enough of it that'll stick up high to finish off this garden scene. I'll spritz this with water from a distress sprayer, blot it dry. I spritzed this a couple times. After I spritzed it the first time, I felt like it needed even more distressing. I think it helps give it a little bit of a cloudy sky type of look. So I'll spritz that again, blot it dry, and then clean up my surface. So there are my three pieces for building the background. We're going to go ahead and stamp the images that we're going to use to build the scene now. All of my images today come from the Some Bunny stamp set, perfect for creating spring and Easter cards. I'm going to use all three bunny images from the stamp set, as well as the watering can, shovel, and the carrots. And then we'll use greetings and the little dotted dashed lines, I guess dashed, not dotted, dashed lines to make it appear that the bunny is watering the garden. I'm going to use the MISTI so I can stamp these images all at once. I'm using Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink. This is a great ink for Copic coloring. It's not going to bleed. I'm stamping these images on Neenah smooth white cardstock, and then I'll color them in with Copic markers. I did go ahead and stamp additional carrot images because I wanted plenty to tuck into my stitched garden border. We're going to start by coloring in the carrots with YR04 and YR09, and coloring in the tops of the carrots then with YG01 and YG17. I kept it pretty simple here. I felt like I did blend out the carrots a little too much. I colored them first with YR04 and then went back with YR09. So I went back and added even more dark in there, and then I blended it out again if I felt like it needed it a little bit. Again, starting with my light color YG01 for the tops of the carrots, and then I just kind of feathered in YG17 without doing any blending. Next, we're going to color in the bunnies. I wanted them to appear to be white but still have some nice shading. We'll use W5, then W3, finishing with W1 and warm gray 00. All of these are in the warm gray color family. I personally prefer warm grays for coloring in my critters. A little R00 for the insides of the ears and the cheeks, and then blending them out. We'll do the same thing on the remaining two bunnies, starting just very, very little warm gray 5, a little bit more warm gray 3, quite a bit more of warm gray 1, and finishing with warm gray 00 all over. And really, as that dries, it dries very, very light. And then a little R00 for the insides of the ears and the cheeks, dotting the bunny's tails with warm gray 1 to give them a little bit of texture. And then finally finishing with the little bunny jumping along down in the garden. All three of these are colored exactly the same. Now, the watering can and shovel, I think I forgot to turn my camera on. Real quick, I colored those with the watering can with our 000, 11, and 32, and then part of the shovel with Y11 and 08, and then some of the warm grays, warm gray 5 and 3. Next, I'm going to take a piece of black licorice Lawn Fawn cardstock. Use a powder deactivation tool on this. I want to stamp my sentiment with Versamark ink and heat emboss with the Lawn Fawn white embossing powder. And I want to center this in the middle. So I'm using the greetings and building my greeting. I love that you can mix and match these. So it reads, "Some bunny loves you." And then I'll do a little dot, dot, dot with a white pen so that the sentiment finishes on the inside of the card with "Happy Easter." Stamping that right along the top edge, we'll grab the white embossing powder. I love the look of white embossing powder on black cardstock. I think it really shows up nicely. We'll sprinkle that on, grab the heat tool, heat set this, and then I'm going to use the tonic guillotine trimmer to trim this into a strip that's going to be placed along the bottom edge of the stitched garden border. Now, the powder deactivation tool leaves a little bit of residue on the cardstock. I like to just take my finger and buff that off. You could also take a rag or something and get the rest of that powder off of your cardstock. I'm going to cut about 1 inch off the bottom of the blue sky background, and then I'm going to grab a white side fold card base and start putting my card together. Starting with the blue sky background, we'll put some adhesive on that and place that on the top of the background. Then we will take the grassy border and adhere that next. The stitched garden border goes next, and I went ahead and left the carrots in place where I placed them when I was just kind of seeing how it all looked. Just put some adhesive on the back of those to hold those down in place. We'll go ahead and tuck the bunnies, the watering can, and the shovel. We'll adhere all of that to the scene. The standing bunnies are going to be tucked behind the grass, standing there. I'm using a combination of adhesives, kind of whatever worked best for whatever I was using. If the images are smaller, I used glue dots. If they were bigger, I used my tape runner. I want to take the dashed lines from the image in the Some Bunny stamp set and stamp that so it looks like the bunny is watering the garden. And that will help kind of fill in and finish off the top portion of the card. And the other bunny is going to be holding the shovel in his hand. They're doing a little gardening. And finally, the little bunny hopping across the bottom here. And then using a piece of score tape, I find score tape works the best. I'm going to place that on the back of the black greeting strip and pop that in place. This is the 1/8 inch score tape. Now, part of my background is a little bit bigger than my card base, so I'm just going to simply trim that off with some scissors. And I will take a white pin and create some little dots there at the end of the greeting so that the recipient knows that inside the card there's going to be a little additional text. There is the front of the card all finished. We'll go ahead and take a greeting then we're going to take that white pin again and add some detail to the images. This is really going to finish off the card. I've loved the look of adding little white highlights. So on the bunny's cheeks, we've added little dots. On the bunnies themselves, the watering can, the carrots, all of those things, I'm adding little white lines that are adding highlights to everything. And it's a really small little detail that adds a lot to the finished design of the card. And I just want to make sure that I hit all of the images here. Even the bunnies, in real life, you can see the highlights on the bunnies even better than you can here on camera. I think it's a little bit hard to see here, but in the finished photos, hopefully at the end of the video, you can see those just a little bit better. Finally, I'm going to take some black VersaFine ink, stamp Happy Easter on the inside of my card to finish off the design, and that will complete this card featuring new stamps and dies from the latest release from Fawn. The supplies I used to create this card are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more videos featuring Fawn stamps and dies that you might be interested in. Please subscribe for weekly card making and stamping videos. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.